Happy Sunday, folks. Time for another weekly update. This last week, some of what I was able to do was interactions around business development, learning a little about what folks are looking to bring here. So, one of those was a presentation on biochar. So, um, when you take organic material, you layer, what did they do? They layered smaller at the bottom, kind of large piece in the middle, and very fine at the top so that they can burn off all the unclean stuff coming out the top. And the product that was left over is kind of a porous material that's a good supplement to things like fertilizer. And it can be a byproduct of energy generation. So it's uh, what was called a value added product, or not a value added product, I'm sorry, it's a cogen. So it's co-generated with something else. And one of our mills in the area is looking at doing this, it turned out. So one of our mills is looking at using some of what's left over from what they're producing to run parts of their mill and take the biochar, and that is an additional marketable item that wasn't part of what the initial process would have been. Something similar, circling back a couple weeks ago to an economic summit we had here in Coos Bay, that, or no, it was over in North Bend because it was at the Mill Casino, where they talked about a project that was done over in, I believe, Iceland with the types of fish they catch. The fish itself, the meat, it's got a value, but it's not huge. So they looked at what else can be generated out of this fish, turned one fish into a lot of money. And this is something similar in concept, but with more fibrous material. You're going to use it to generate power. But if it's done this way, it generates power and it generates a usable product at the end that TLBP, the 10 Mile Lake Basin Partnership, is working on using as a way, or talking about using as a way to mitigate algae blooms, because this biochar material will absorb nutrients from the water that the algae feed on, and it creates a healthier water system for the other things that aren't invasive species of algae and those sort of critters. Um, and an additional use in fertilizer. So you add biochar to fertilizer, creates a substrate. The soil is better when you add it. So a neat little side thing that can be created out of processes where we're already doing. And that was a talk that happened over in Lakeside. Other than that, we also had a commissioners meeting this week where we talked about funding priorities as far as federal money goes. So around this time of year, different legislators put in for money, or they're preparing for this next cycle where they're going to request amounts of money for communities for things we need to do. And in the scope of our purposes, small dollar to a lot of communities, $2 million is a lot of money to us. So the money goes up to 2 mil. And we talked in the meeting about things like we have a natural gas pipeline that needs some work. So that would be a good thing to have money for, because that pipeline feeds, I believe, over 1,000 homes, some of our larger businesses. There's software we need to purchase. Aside from just the hard equipment that goes into our technology, we need some software to help us make our documents online more ADA compliant, more accessible. There's been some discussion around that, with some folks frustrated over the amount of money that costs and the requirement that's not coming with money. I can understand that, but the ADA aspect here is so that you can make the files, one, readable with software that can't, for folks that can't see, it'll read the document to them. I've used it before as a way to not have to read so many pages. But also, beneficial side consequences, it'll make our documents searchable, which was one of my frustrations when I was getting ready to come into office, was City of Coos Bay, our agendas and everything, you could search. You could go onto the website, punch in a keyword, and it would pull you up all the agendas where that word came up. The county doesn't have such a thing, but hopefully by the end of this process, we're going to. The ADA compliance is coming one way or another. This is just a way to request money that would avoid it coming out of the general fund, which is strained, as folks know. And then we also talked about the sheriff's office brought up the third third floor of the jail building is largely unutilized. There's no cells up there. So when that building was built, brief history here, really glancing over, but the jail in Coos County has 5 pods. Each pod is about 49 beds. I could be off, give or take 1 or 2 beds in there. But it has roughly 250 beds within it, each staffed by pod for pod. So we have 1 pod, we have 49 beds available, but the building has 250 beds conceivably in it. The 3rd floor is not included in that. The 3rd floor is completely blank, other than the leads you would need to build a cell block, so the water and the power and stuff pop up through the ground. But the sheriff's office brought this up in the meeting as an opportunity. What can we do with this large open space? Is there a way we can turn this into a revenue generator through investment from the feds so that our community can continue to raise revenues, support the critical services everybody wants, and do it in a way that doesn't require taxes to go up? Because the sheriff's office, everybody has heard loud and clear over these last few years, multiple safety levies have gone through, none have passed. We need to find ways we generate revenue on our own. So they brought this up as a spot where we can look at. And then afterwards, myself and I don't know if John went later, I know Rod came, we looked at that space in the jail so that we have a picture in our head of what we're talking about if we see an opportunity. We did that. We talked about that. I briefly talked about ADA. It's expensive, but it's not just beneficial to the folks that need adaptive software. It's also useful to us. We can run searches and documents when they're ADA compliant. That's nice. 3rd floor, biochar. Let's see. We've got a family had asked me to come to a court hearing actually on Monday. I had gone to their son works at being vague here, but he works at a coffee stand within the county, and somebody having issues for one reason or another was outside it one day with a knife, threatening people, threatened an 8-year-old kid apparently, threatened this guy. It was a mess, apparently. I don't remember hearing anybody got hurt in the process, so that's good, but it was a big deal, obviously, for everybody involved, and now this guy, young guy, has had to take time off work to come to these multiple court hearings. You don't actually have to come to some of them, as I was learning, but when you're a person that has suffered this experience, knowing when and when not to show up, you're going to want to show up to everything, is where I'm headed with that. And this individual had been back to court, the offender, or accused, I guess, multiple times throughout this process. There's been back and forth around what sounds to have been an aid and assist situation. That ties into the mental health issues I've talked about quite a bit in the past few months. And just, it gave me an opportunity to see what this family's going through, trying to resolve something that would seem like it should be really simple. And I also want to stress here, there's a tendency I see nationally to blame judges, and we shouldn't blame our judges for doing the letter of the law. That is the function of a judge. It has to be an unimaginably difficult job because, well, I guess it is relatable, but whatever their personal feelings are, it's not a factor. They've got to follow letter of the law. So I don't want to see any of our local judges blamed for these things, but just the way the system is as a whole, the structure, the complications, once there's a mental health issue in a state like Oregon where the mental health system has failed, it's very frustrating to see for that family. And it gave me a jumping off point where I've had a conversation with state courts trying to get an idea what's going on. I'll be talking with some other folks. Things are a bit slow right now because we're around the holiday season and folks who have work-life balance go do things. I do updates, but yeah, that'll be something else I'm just kind of looking into quietly in the background, but so folks know that's one of the other things that can come up on our plate as commissioners is people want you to know what's going on with their lives, and then you try and look at what is going on. Why were they wanting to look at it? And what can we make better so that people can live just a little easier? The ideal situation is when nobody has to think of us as commissioners, because that means their life is going very smoothly. So we'll see what we can do here. I was able to attend a Board of Commissioners meeting for the Port of Coos Bay. Had not been to one of those, actually. It was kind of surprising. I got on council in 2016, and I hadn't been to one of these, but I talked a lot about them before. So, reason I was there is, one, I wanted to finally catch one, but also there was some information around the extended business plan for the Port of Coos Bay, and a little bit about the International Port Project, but not much. The main focus was just the broader scope. Port of Coos Bay, while I was on council, and they had previous leadership, I was pretty critical. The inaction I saw on certain properties, areas where they could have been helping with housing, just problems in general there were between the interactions between the city of Coos Bay and the port, projects that had been held up for months and months. But having said that, circling back, leadership has changed. There's a new person. Well, it's not new. She's not new, but she's been in that role. I don't remember when she took over, actually. It's been within a year or two, though, I'm sure. Nutshell, though. New CEO from when I had problems with them. I think the entire board is new, ish, from time frames where there were problems from my interaction. And I think it's important that we look at where we're at today, because something I see come up a lot is folks remembering where things were a decade ago, which you do have to remember, or planning as though we are 20 years back or 30 years back. It's important to remember those things, but we also have to remember when things have changed. And the people there now, after I left that meeting, there were folks there who were telling me this is the most transparency they have seen from the Port of Coos Bay ever. And they've been here decades themselves. So when we read about challenges that the Port of Coos Bay is having, it's important to recognize, one, we know those challenges because they're being transparent, which is very nice, and the leadership is working to do something about it. They had some very stressful things come up in the meeting, but they also had plans to solve them. So it was a good experience and a good meeting for me to have attended. Wasn't exactly a light meeting for my first meeting with them, but they covered a lot of important ground, and it'll be interesting to see where things go. They had some pretty innovative ideas, some ideas around developing plots of land that I've been asking for years why they're not being developed, which is nice. They're thinking on their feet and they're working. So that was a good experience, a good one to be able to be at. The PCIP did get brought up a little. Mostly I still have folks in the community talking to me about it. I haven't had, that I can recall, I've had maybe one meeting with somebody directly involved in it separate from any other meetings where that was the specific topic. But broadly, I don't hear a lot about it at this point. And there's kind of a reasoning behind that for me. I have no doubt that if I wanted to talk to folks more about the PCIP, then any of the folks on the board of the port or any of the folks on the board for that specific project would talk to me. I know they've mentioned things in passing. Coffee. But the reason I don't spend a lot of time on it is something big enough that it doesn't need my help, is kind of my perspective. Well, it is my perspective. There are projects like when Powers is talking about wanting to get research facilities from a university to develop out there, or when there were conversations around Powers and Myrtle Point around a slaughterhouse, or Lakeside wants to do something with some of its ATV trails, or how can we expand that industry. Coos Bay, North Bend, we're talking about housing. Coquille, I mostly talked to the businesses out there, actually. Bandon, I've been out to a couple times, talking about other things. These are things in those communities, even the littler ones like Hauser, when they've got concerns around safety. Those are things I can impact at the level I operate. I can help people look for resources around a slaughterhouse. I can help talk to universities about who would be interested in this. These are the assets that community has. Talk to new owners of ATV parks, point them towards City of Lakeside, interact with the state. But when it comes to things like the PCIP, now we're talking about something that is global in impact. I could wade into it, but it would take a lot of my time. And bang for the buck, I'm not going to be a substantial changing factor in what happens with the PCIP. If we find out with greater certainty it's coming, and I'll continue watching and seeing where I can sneak my way in for conversations around consequences. As commissioners, we are definitely going to be planning around how do we build up community infrastructure to sustain the number of people? How do we abate nuisances? How do we ensure that our fishers are still able to go fish if this thing is coming in? What will the impact on the airport be? What will the impact on community safety? How are we going to address safety? I know some of them have already talked with the sheriff's office about staffing, and the sheriff's office has reached out. I met with the Coast Guard last week about some other stuff. We discussed it. Nutshell, the part that I would be involved in is the consequences, the externalities of the PCIP coming in. I don't spend a great deal of time on that particular project because making it happen is something for people with billions and billions of dollars and large staff. I definitely don't have billions of dollars, and the three of us commissioners share one bobby. So I put my time where it's going to be most effective. It's not always the flashiest, but it is the way work will get done. And we've got, I mentioned the Coast Guard. I met with them. So I got a call from a staffer from one of our legislators asking me what I had heard about reallocation of resources from Bandon related to the Coast Guard. Quick clarifier, there is not a change happening there. The Coast Guard has a pier out there for mooring their vessel, and that pier sounds to be in bad condition. So I was able to relay back to the legislator staffer that they may want to talk to the Army Corps of Engineers, because the one asset that's out there sounds like it's in bad shape, and if something changes, that'll be why. Not because somebody shuffled a bunch of Coast Guard resources around. There is no base in Bandon. There's a pier, though. But in the course of that conversation, we also talked about housing. So also circling back on the PCIP, if that happens, there's going to need to be housing for not just the people coming in to work that, but also people that are going to keep the waters safe. That's the Coast Guard, along with law enforcement. But yeah, we talked about how the Coast Guard can play a role in housing expansion. I was able to connect their commanding officer with folks in some of the other cities. They've already got a good interaction with North Bend going, connected the CO over to Coos Bay as well. Tied it in with some past conversations I had with the National Guard about their facility, their area, and possible housing developments on their unused plats. And yeah, we connected a couple more dots on how we can get some more housing built. And last week, Commissioner Bethel is a county commissioner out of Marion County. I know her from the Association of Counties and some work prior to that where my city stuff overlapped with county stuff. She is running for governor, and it was good to be able to meet her. Obviously, with some of the things I talk about here, present leadership isn't working out as far as good outcomes for our community, in my perspective, and it hasn't for quite a while. One of the things that is going to be a big factor for me moving forward into this coming election cycle is knowing that 60% of cities and counties are facing insolvency within the next 5 years. So I've brought that up before. Tracy asked me a question about it after the last one. I apologize I didn't get back to you, Tracy. But nutshell, it means 60% of Oregon cities and counties will be bankrupt. They will not be able to deliver their statutorily required services. So what does that mean? Well, for a county, we've got a tax assessor, set your tax rates, a surveyor so that we can build things, a planning department so that you can get your codes approved. If you don't, and obviously others like the clerk that records our documents and handles elections, the small things, if you don't do those, normally the state comes in and does them for you. Now, that is what I've been told is what happens. If anything, over the past few years has been demonstrated to me, it's that the state can't do it. They can't run. I say they, I mean the structure of it. The structure of the state's governance has not been able to successfully run much. I mean, we can look at any number of areas. You can look at why are we allocated 14 state troopers and we only ever have had 9 since before the 90s? Why is the mental health system a train wreck? How has it collapsed so badly? Why is Oregon so low on any ranking of being good for business? Office of Developmental Disability Services, when I was working alongside them, were a struggle. Came within, 3 days of 800 people's housing not getting funded and 1,200 people's energy bills not getting paid while I was running Orca because OHCS hadn't released the money after months. The state can't run what it has right now the way it's designed. If our cities and counties go under, they really can't help that. They're not going to be able to do it. So, as the playing field sits right now, the only candidate that I'm aware of running for governor who has experience as either a city councilor or a commissioner is Danielle Bethel. I don't remember if she was a city councilor before. I know she's been a commissioner for several years. Her background, she brought it up in a meeting. She, what was it? Yeah, she was raised largely by her mother. Mother took off young, hard run of it. And survivors tend to know how to get things done. And she's also the only person on the ballot who has experience with local government. So it was good to see her present. I'll be interested to see where things go. I always tell folks I don't make up my mind on who I'm going to vote for until quite late in the game, because you never know what somebody's going to do between now and then. You could say you're going to support somebody it being in December, and by January they've just gone off the rails. God knows what happened. So we'll see as we get closer. But I can't tell if that was a cat screaming or my baby. But that was a good opportunity to get to meet her. Let's see. CFAA, on the mental health topic, the mental health agreement with the county and the state that I've talked about repeatedly for months now, in part because there have been 3 deadlines and all 3 of them have passed with no county signing on because the state wanted unreasonable things, appears to be solved. I got a message at 7:42, I think it was Wednesday evening, letting me know that boilerplate language had finally been agreed upon between the different county councils and the state. And the 3 points of contention I brought up before were the state wanted to remove subject to availability of funds from the contract, so not guarantee the money to do the job. They wanted to, through a lot of words, send their overflow from the state hospital to the counties to make it our thing without the guarantee of the money. That was a problem. And they did not want to put anything in there that protected counties against the consequences of the fines the state is currently incurring. So the state is being fined $500 per day per person that's more than 7 days waiting to go to the state hospital to be assessed to stand trial, to see if they can mentally stand trial. They've paid $1.4 million since June for that. That is a lot of days. And as counties, we wanted to make sure that those fines weren't going to come to us when we try and do the job the state hasn't done, especially when they weren't guaranteeing to give us enough money to do it. And for some added context here, this is the result of a lawsuit that started in the early 2000s. So this is a long time coming. There was time to plan, and that wasn't done. It sounds like these things have been fixed. I haven't seen our version of it. This is the boiler language we're told is good. But after I see our version of it, we'll see if this is a good thing or not. But it's definitely the best news we've had so far. And it's a commendation to all my fellow commissioners throughout the state and ours here. Everyone held the line. It got to the point that Multnomah County was offering legal assistance to a county of 8,000 people so that they could continue fighting for what was going to be in the best interest of their people, Multnomah's people, that county's people, and all counties' people in Oregon. It got so bad the urban-rural divide was mended for a period of time. We'll see where it goes from here, but that was very good news. Yeah, that's a high note. We're coming up on Christmas. I'll end on a high note. Happy holidays, everybody. Merry Christmas. I saw Hanukkah started recently. But, yeah, whatever you celebrate, have a good one. Have good food, and stay safe. And take care.